Well, good morning. How are you? You know what? You guys are absolute superstars. You drove through the snow and you are here this morning to worship Jesus. So give yourselves a big, massive pat on the back. Well done, you guys. Wow, it's very exciting. You know, almost I love the white stuff, and then it's sort of that added thing of, ooh, this is a bit different, driving in like that. But, you know, God is looking after us. We're here, we're safe, we're sound, and it's just been great to worship Jesus so far, hasn't it? Yeah. And, you know, I just know that, you know, with the fast that a lot of people have been doing for the first 3 weeks to start off this year, there's just an increase in hunger and passion for God. You know, would you agree? Yeah. You know, it's interesting, though, talking to different ones. So I was talking to someone before the service and going, oh, I love the fast and I'm going to keep going, and, you know, they're just really getting so much out of it. And then someone else is going, can't wait for the fast to be finished. I'm going to have so many cups of tea this afternoon. But, you know, we all have different aspects, don't we, when it comes to fasting. There's some parts of fasting I love. You know, I really do like that sense of clearer thinking, and I like that sense of drawing close to God, and also just each time we've done it, we have seen breakthroughs happen. You know, I remember it was 2 years ago we had a breakthrough with Planning Commission. You know, this year the steels have started coming up. It's not a coincidence. Because you know what, as a church, we're not just changing the physical landscape here, we're changing the spiritual landscape. And you can only do that by praying and fasting. And so I want to thank you if you've come on board with the fast and doing it, in whatever form you've done it. You know, some people haven't fasted food. That's okay. I know of someone who fasted their Xbox. And trust me, that's a miracle.
Amen.
Okay? And so, you know, God sees what is a sacrifice for us, and when we're saying, Jesus, I want you in my life more than I want my Xbox, or more than I want chocolate or meat, or whatever it is that you've been fasting. And I want to encourage you, if you're just hearing about it now for the first time, or if you weren't able to join in, you know, fasting is a spiritual discipline. Jesus said it was a spiritual discipline, like giving, like praying, you know, reading the word. They're all spiritual disciplines. Fasting is another one. And you don't need to wait for Kirk and I to call a fast. You can actually fast whenever you want, however you want, for as long as you want. Okay? But, you know, in your life, somewhere, make room to fast, because what you're doing actually, you're making room for God in your life. And I just find I learn a sense of control. Sometimes we can feel victims to our habits, you know, whether it's our habits of TV watching or social media or what we eat. And when you pause on those things, you just go, actually, they're not the master of my life. You know, God, with your help, I can master these things. So, you know, I hope through this time that you can launch into this year, you can enter into a new level of closeness with God. But, you know, enjoy going back on the chocolate and everything else you're getting stuck back into for the next week or so. So today I want to talk about the backstory of Joshua, because, you know, we've been encouraging you during the fast to read the story of Joshua. And I don't know about you, but when you start it just gets straight in there, doesn't it? Let's have a look at the first 2 verses in Joshua 1. It says this: After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant, Moses, my servant, is dead. He doesn't dress it up at all, does he? He's gone. Now then, you and all these people get ready to cross the river Jordan into the land I'm about to give to them, to the Israelites. So then it just launches straight into this story. Well, don't you wonder, why did Joshua get picked? Why is it Joshua? Why is it not Caleb? Why is it not someone else? And you know, I think for us to engage with the story of Joshua, because we're going to be talking about it a lot this year, it helps us to know his backstory. And you know, because through a backstory, we get a sense of who someone is. We get an idea of their values and what education they had, and what is it about them that has really prepared them for the role they're about to take. Last night, Kirk and I watched a documentary on Neil Armstrong, and all I knew of him before was that he was the first man to walk on the moon. You know, one small step for man, you know, another giant leap for mankind, that's it. Well, you know, I didn't know he was a farm boy. I didn't know that he fell in love with flying at a young age and that he taught himself, well, he got flying lessons without his parents even knowing. He had his pilot's license before he had his driving license. Shows the degree that he loved flying. So when we get someone's backstory, we understand more of who they are and what drives them and why they make the decisions they do. And so I think it's really helpful for us to learn about Joshua's backstory today. Plus, I just think all of us, love to know more about people. And, you know, one medium that has really explored backstories really well and exploited it for their own benefits has been reality TV shows. Okay? You know that if a contestant does not have a backstory playing, they are not progressing through the competition, are they? Okay? The backstory is very important. So today, I want to see how well some of our congregation know their reality TV stars. So I've asked a couple of people to volunteer. You want to come out, guys? Olivia? Leo? We are going to play Who Am I? Okay? All right. Now, okay, Olivia, you can stand this side. So what I want you to do, if you think you know the answer, I want you to call your name out as soon as you think you know it. Yeah, okay, but I'm going to move this because you can see the pictures. All right. So you say your own name. Do you know your name? Leo, you got to yell it out. Yeah, call your name.
Olivia.
Okay, so that way I know who's answering the question. All right. Okay, so I'm going to start describing their backstory. The moment you think you know who it is, say your name, and then I'll get you to tell us who it is. So the first one. When he won the first series of Britain's Got Talent, he was living in Bristol and working at Carphone Warehouse. And if they don't know it, someone can yell out their name in the...
Paul Potts.
Paul Potts is right! He's the man with the funny teeth that's the opera. Okay, next one. You've got 4 more to redeem yourself. She wasn't born. It wasn't that long ago. Alright, this one. Alright, next one. Okay, if they don't know, guys, you just got to help them along. This great British Bake Off winner was a homemaker living in Leeds with a husband, an IT specialist, and 3 children while studying for an open university degree. This is a big clue. She is a 2nd-generation British Bangladeshi born. Oh, okay. Nadia Hussain, there she is. Very British Bake Off girl. All right, okay, so music buds. I hope you know this one, Leon. Leo, okay. Leon's up the back, sorry. Okay, this X Factor winner was born in Witham, Essex. He played football semi-professionally for Northside Witham Town between 2006 and 2008. Yeah! I know who's watching all the TV here. Alright, next one. Alright, you've got to get this one, surely. This Scottish singer's audition...
Susan Boyle.
Yeah! There she is. You need to say your name, it's alright. We're all yelling out now, aren't we? Okay, last one. Last one. Time to prove yourself, Leo. Alright. This Middlesbrough singer-songwriter, oops, I went off the page, during his X Factor audition explained his past, including a short spell in respite foster care and time spent in flats. Yeah! James Arthur. Well done, guys. You tried. Well done. Some of you there going, I don't know any of them. Some of you that are going, I know every single one. You need to fast television. Okay? No. All right. You know, we like to know their backstories because they're people like us, aren't they? In those kind of reality TV shows, none of them start out as celebrities. They all start out as someone with a family that loves them. Their family probably is a bit dysfunctional. You know, they've all had struggles in life and, you know, they've got a dream. And we see them go for their dream and we watch them as they progress through them and it inspires us, doesn't it? It gives us hope because we think if they can do it, and they're just like me, maybe I can too. And so they're a source of inspiration for us. And you know, today I want you to be inspired by Joshua's story, because Joshua didn't start out as a leader. Joshua started from really disadvantaged circumstances, and he rose through the course of his life to end up being the overall leader of all of this nation of Israel. So, you know, I want you to be inspired today by Joshua's story, and I'm going to point out different aspects of his backstory. It is going to be a brief overview, and if you want to know more, read the second to the fifth book of the Bible. That will help you out. Okay? So I'm just giving you the pull out bits today. So let's begin with the beginning. All right? So what we do know about Joshua is that he was born a slave. Okay? His family, they were slaves, and they were slaves in Egypt. And you know, he was part of the nation of Israel who had been caught up in slavery for 400 years. And during that time, they had become so distraught in their circumstances, they called out to God. They called out for God to save them. We know that from the start of Exodus. And God hears them, and he raises up Moses, and the story begins of how they are delivered out of Egypt. But we know that Joshua was born a slave, and he was one of these slaves who would have seen the rise of Moses and all that went with it. But the interesting thing about Joshua is that even though he was born a slave and his nation really had a very fatalistic point of view, they called out to God, but they kind of didn't really believe he was going to help them. His father and mother had hope because they had named him Hoshea. He wasn't called Joshua when he was born, he was called Hoshea, had a different name, and his name meant salvation. Wow. And I just think that's interesting, that even in such difficult circumstances of being slaves, his family had hope. And so they had that hope for their child, and so they named him Salvation. And you know, when we call things out as different to what our circumstances are, yes, that's an act of faith.
Come on. That's great.
And you know, that is the beginning of the miracle sometimes. Wow. To not just accept your lot, wow, but to say, I believe that there is a way out.
Wow, that's awesome.
And they don't say what the way out is, but they go, I believe it for my child.
Amen.
And so yeah, I'm going to speak that into him. And so he starts living out with this sense of purpose.
Wow, that's awesome.
From a young child. He might have been a slave, but he had destiny on his life, little Hoshea. And you know, as he grew up, he was a slave, and you know, he had, you know, obligations he was forced to meet. And you know, but he sees Moses come along and start agitating the Egyptians, and then he witnesses God's hand at work through the plagues coming and attacking the Egyptians. And then he's one who leaves after the first Passover. He ate the first Passover, wow. Hoshea, with his family, we assume. And then he left Egypt, he walked through the Red Sea, and he was following Moses in the wilderness. This was his beginning. And you know, the one called Salvation left Egypt. It actually happened in his lifetime. And you know, he wasn't primarily involved in any way, but his circumstances were already beginning to change. And you know, when you are witnessing a miracle, like we are witnessing a miracle even with the building on the land, it gives us hope that for our own lives, things can change. If God can do a miracle there, he can do a miracle in my life.
Right.
You know, I want to encourage you, you know, from this quote of Joyce Meyers, your beginning doesn't have to dictate your ending.
Very good.
Joshua was born a slave, but he didn't stay that way.
Wow.
You might have been born into really difficult circumstances, but they are not your destiny.
Very good.
There is a God who wants to rescue every single one of us and bring us into the fullness of life he has for us. He can lift you up and elevate us.
Amen.
So, the first mention of Joshua in the Bible actually takes place in Exodus 17, the first time we read his name. And it's interesting because he's called Joshua in this account, but technically at the time, he would have been Hoshea. So obviously this account was written later on after his name had changed. But in the first account of him in the Bible, we see that the children of Israel, the nation of Israel, had come through the Red Sea. They just started camping in the wilderness, and they get attacked by this nomadic tribe called the Amalekites. Say that, Amalekites. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Now, these guys were horrible. If you've ever seen Star Wars and the Sand People, the horrible ones, they're like them. They really are bad news, and they continue to cause lots of trouble for the nation of Israel right up to Esther's time. Haman was one of these people. Anyway, so these Amalekites take no pity on this nation that has just crossed through the Red Sea. God's been at work, but they decide to try and attack these people. And so Moses calls Joshua to form an army. These slaves did not have any army. And so Joshua gets the task of picking out some blokes and saying, okay guys, here's some weapons, we are going to fight the Amalekites. And in this account of the battle, there's the two sides to the fight. Okay, Joshua is leading the army down here, just the blur, just imagine the blur as an army. And then Moses is up on the hill praying, he's got his arms lifted and he's got Aaron and Hur helping hold up his arms. And we'll see why in the passage. If you look at Exodus 17, starting from verse 8, the Amalekites came and attacked the Israelites at Rephidim. Moses said to Joshua, choose some of our men and go out to fight the Amalekites. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hands. So Joshua fought the Amalekites as Moses had ordered, and Moses, Aaron and Hur went up to the top of the hill. As long as Moses held up his hands, the Israelites were winning. But whenever he lowered his hands, the Amalekites were winning. When Moses' hands grew tired, they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it. Aaron and Hur held his hands up, one on one side, one on the other, so that his hands remained steady till sunset. So Joshua overcame the Amalekite army with the sword. So it's the first battle that this nation has had to fight in, and they win. And one of the commentaries I was reading suggested that Moses may have asked Joshua to form the army because he may, as a slave, have served in the military in Egypt. Because we see this pattern with other people that Moses had used. He asked Aholiab and Bezalel, I think their names are, to craft the items in the tabernacle because they were skilled at it. Wow. And Moses had an eye for skilled people. So it's quite possible that Joshua had picked up military skills as a slave. And because he had these skills, he was then asked to raise up this army, which he then led. The other thing we see here, though, is that Joshua learns that his skills aren't enough. This battle was won in tandem with Moses praying. And not just with Moses praying, but with Yahweh, the God of hosts, fighting for his people. Yeah, wow. And right from the outset, Joshua learns that if he's going to lead the armies of God's people, then he's going to fight with God. He's not just going to do it on his own. And you know, I want to encourage you through this. Don't tackle the destiny of your life without God.
Come on now.
Because God created you with plans and purposes that he wrote before time, but you are not meant to achieve the plans and purposes for your life without God's help.
Absolutely.
The other thing I want to encourage you with from this aspect of Joshua's backstory is don't despise your day job. Because, you know, if it's true that Joshua had these military skills and learned them as a slave, well, God was using what was in his past now in his present. Right. And sometimes we can look at our life experiences, our education, what we do for a job and go, how can you use this guy? Well, God's got a plan and a purpose.
Come on now.
And, you know, I have seen time and time again how God has used stuff from my teaching life in my now ministry life. Yeah. One of the things I used to teach when I first started teaching was how to use a spreadsheet, Excel. And I wasn't taught how to do this in teachers college. I had to learn on the job because Excel kind of became new at the time. So I'm working it out with the kids. Sometimes I was watching the kids, what they were doing, and they'd go, okay, everyone, we're now going to do this. Okay, but, you know, I had to learn with them. But now, I must use Excel nearly every day in my work as an executive pastor. Okay? God uses what's in our past, in our present, and he'll use it in the future. Don't despise your day job, and don't despise the experiences that you've had bringing you to here and now. So, moving on. Next part of his backstory. You know, I started talking about reality TV shows. I must make a confession. One of my favourite reality TV shows is The Apprentice. Okay, I love it. I love the drama. I love the tasks. I love. Some of them are such numpties, and you think, how did you get picked? And some of them obviously very clever and playing a very strategic game. But the final bit where we get, Lord Sugar going, you're hired. It's all very exciting. But actually, before there was Lord Sugar, there was Lord Moses. And Moses picked Joshua to be his apprentice. After the battle and that Joshua won in tandem with Moses praying, we're told that Moses asked Joshua to be his assistant. And, with that, Joshua now has a ringside seat to some of the major events of the wilderness. When Moses climbed Mount Sinai to receive the Ten Commandments, Joshua was there. And it was Joshua who told Moses that there was a noise coming from the camp. It was Joshua who alerted Moses to the people worshipping the golden calf. And it was really such an important part of Joshua's preparation that he spent all this time with Moses. He watched Moses talk with God. He watched how Moses made decisions. He watched how Moses led. And, it really prepared him for what was coming next. I just want to show you a couple of verses. In Numbers 11, verse 28, we're told this. Joshua, son of Nun, who had been Moses' assistant since youth, spoke up and said, Moses, my Lord, stop them. And what that verse is referring to is that there were some people in the camp, in the nation of Israel, who were prophesying. And Joshua was very loyal, and he heard about it. So he comes to Moses and said, you should be the only one who's talking. And Moses goes on to say, well, if they're full of the Spirit of God, that's a good thing. It's fine. Let them speak. So we see that Joshua was very loyal to Moses. Okay, but he'd been doing this a long time as well. He'd been his assistant since youth.
Wow.
Okay, so he's been Moses' apprentice. And I just wonder, are you someone like Joshua? Are you someone who's a support?
Wow.
Are you someone who's loyal?
Wow.
Because, he was a soldier. He knew how to take orders as well as give orders.
Wow.
And that's really important as we step into what God has for us. Are we people who can receive orders from our leaders, but also take orders and lead ourselves? The second thing I want to show you here in these verses is the name change. And I think what happened in the course of Moses mentoring Joshua, bringing him in close, is that he identified from an early point that Joshua would be his successor one day. And he called out in Joshua the purpose of God.
Wow.
And, part of that was changing his name. And this description comes from the names of the spies that went in to check out the Promised Land. Kirk's already spoken about that today. And we're told here that from the tribe of Ephraim was Hoshea the son of Nun. Okay, so here's his name that he was born with. But then it goes on in verse 16 to say this. These were the names of the men whom Joshua sent to spy out the land. And Moses called Hoshea the son of Nun, Joshua. So before the spy Joshua is sent out, his name is changed by his boss. Maybe we should change some of the staff's names. Oh, that's what you do all the time anyway. Hitcho, Atkins. What do you call Tim? Atkins, that's it. Kirk changes everyone's name anyway, but there's no spiritual significance to Kirk's name changes. But with Moses, there is. He changes his name from salvation to the Lord saves.
Wow.
And we see this partnership that is becoming important, reinforced in the name change. You can't lead unless you do it in partnership with God.
Yeah.
If you're leading into the destiny that God has for you. And so from that point on, Joshua is reminded every time someone calls his name that God is doing the saving.
Wow.
It's not man doing the saving.
Wow.
Salvation hasn't come from men. Salvation has come from God. And as he leads, he needs to keep reminding himself, and he will be reminded every day.
That's awesome.
By people saying his name, that it's God that is doing the saving. And none of us can pull off this life on our own. Okay, it is God who does the work. It is God doing the miracle, and let's do it in partnership with him. Moving on. Another aspect of his backstory that I want to encourage you with is this, is Joshua loved the presence of God. Amen. Absolutely loved the presence of God. And in Exodus 33, we see this description of what happens with Moses and when he goes to the tabernacle to talk to God. Whenever the people saw the pillar of cloud, which was the presence of God, standing at the entrance to the tent, which was the tabernacle, where the Ark of the Covenant was, they all stood and worshipped, each at the entrance to their tent. The Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as one speaks to a friend. Then Moses would return to the camp, but his young assistant, Joshua, son of Nun, did not leave the tent. And I just think it's interesting that Joshua gets to witness these conversations between God and Moses. But even when Moses is done, Joshua stays on.
Wow.
And it's thought that during this time, Joshua learned to cultivate his own relationship with God.
Wow.
Joshua learns how to communicate for himself with God. And I think this is so important. We can't rely on other people communicating to God on our behalf.
Wow. Wow.
Okay, God expects us to develop a relationship with Him that will sustain us.
Yeah.
And you know, we can model ourselves on what we see other people do, but let's desire the presence of God. Let's linger in the presence of God. And you know, Joshua learned a great secret, hadn't he? He learned that in the presence of God is everything he needed to do the life of God. And I found this great quote from John Wimber, which is this. He says, "We don't seek God's power, we seek His presence. His power and everything else we need is always found in His presence." And I want to encourage you, if you are facing a situation that needs an answer, that needs God to intervene, seek His presence. Worship. You know, there's so much great music that's out there. You can get it on YouTube. You don't even have to pay for it these days. You know, find a worship song, you know, and seek God's presence.
Yeah, come on.
Don't seek Him to intervene. God actually wants us to develop a relationship with Him, for us to learn to trust Him.
Wow. Wow.
And as we trust Him, He then acts, doesn't He?
Wow.
It's the presence of God that inspires us. It comforts us. It gives us strength. It refreshes us. It transforms us to be the person that God always intended for us to be. And there is no substitute for time spent in the presence of God.
Absolutely.
So this year I want to encourage you, you know, as we're entering this new year, to seek out the presence of God. Sometimes it'll be you at home, you know, putting on some worship music and just sitting in God's presence. But I also want to encourage you to make a point of regularly attending church, because something happens when we come together and we worship God. His presence is here and He is revealed in the worship and in the Word. And you know, if it's not our church, find another church. But there's nothing like planting yourself in the house of God. You know, Psalm 84 said, "Blessed are those who dwell in your house. They are ever praising you." There is a blessing that comes from planting yourself in the house of God. So, you know, as people who are called to influence the world, and we all are, I want to encourage you, seek out the presence of God on whatever level of influence you are at. And you know, it does reassure me, I have to say, that our Prime Minister goes to church every Sunday. You know, she's not got an easy task navigating Brexit, and time will tell whether she's done a good job or not of it, but at least she's going to church and worshipping God. She's seeking out His presence, and that's, if she can do it, we can all do it, hey? So moving on, Joshua, another great aspect of his backstory is he had a backbone. And you know, when the minority was saying, when the majority was saying one thing, he was in the minority with Caleb and he stood up for him. Let's have a look at the next slide, because I quite like it. Here we've got time, the minority report. 2 men who believed God, Joshua and Caleb. There we go. I like them, both got very hairy chests as well. The hairy report. Anyway, so, but you know, they were 2 of the 12 spies that went out to check out if the promised land was a good place for God's people to go into. And you know, I don't think Joshua had any problem believing that God could look after the people of Israel in there, because he'd already seen God fight with him. And if God had helped him win the battle against the Amalekites and all the other battles that took place before then God was going to help them overcome the challenges they were going to face in the promised land. And so that was why he had a yes we can attitude. And you know, we, like Joshua, need to have a backbone. We need to be able to stand up for what we believe is true and speak up. We can't let the majority dominate what is said.
Well done.
Just because it's loud doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
And you know, these guys stood up against the noise and said, God said it's our land and we can do it. It's a good land. And they were the only two that lived to go into that country 40 years later because of their faith.
Wow.
And you know, it does make a difference. If you have a yes we can attitude,
Yeah.
you will go into
Yeah,
the
come on
future
now.
God has
That's
for
right.
you.
Absolutely.
If you don't believe God can do what he says he can do, then what are you doing here?
Wow.
Sorry. But you know what I mean? God is sovereign. God is powerful.
Yeah.
And if God's made a promise, he is going to deliver it. And the timetable might be different and the way might be different than we can ever imagine, but God can do it.
Yeah.
I want you to rise up in faith this year because you know what? We have seen God do miracles
come on.
on this journey of building our church. But trust me, there are some more battles coming.
Yeah, come on now.
But we can look back and go, God won those ones. Jesus is building his church. He's going to win these other ones. So we
that's
are
right.
moving forward.
Come on.
And I want you to do the same in your own life. I want you to look at the times God has come through for you. And then go, God, you brought us through before. It's looking really difficult at the moment. These giants are here, but God, I trust you're going to bring us through
Come
again.
on now.
Okay, look at the past, see where God has come through, be inspired by it, and allow it to inform your yes, we can, and stand up for it, even though you look like you're the only one doing it.
Wow.
And finally, I just want to look at Joshua, the chosen successor. This is the last part of the backstory I want to look at today, because I have gone a little long. So when Joshua is 80 years old, he is chosen by God first, then Moses to be the successor. Now that's interesting that he was 80, because when I read it, it feels like he's a teenager sometimes. And I think maybe because often the book of Joshua is used to preach to young people, you're the Joshua generation, but Joshua was 80 when he starts leading. He wasn't a young fella by any stretch of imagination, but he was young in the head. You know, in terms of he had a youthful spirit.
Yeah, come on.
But he's chosen by God to lead the people of Israel. And I just want to look at what God has to say about him in Numbers 27, verses 18 on. So the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, son of Nun. Isn't it interesting that God calls Joshua by the name Moses gave him?
Wow.
The one that says the Lord saves, not by his birth name. God's got a name for you,
Wow.
and your name
Wow.
is to do with your destiny, and
Come
that's
on
what
now.
God calls you
Wow.
by. Amen. Take Joshua, son of Nun, a man in whom is the spirit of leadership, and lay your hand on him. Make him stand before Eleazar the priest and the entire assembly, and commission him in their presence. Give him some of your authority, so that the whole Israelite community will obey him. And then I'm just skipping a verse. At his command, he and the entire community of the Israelites will go out, and at his command, they will come in. I just want to say, God had given Joshua everything he needed to do this task. He calls him, but he also put in him this spirit of leadership. And so he was equipped to make decisions. But we're also told in Deuteronomy 34 that at this point of commissioning, he receives the spirit of wisdom. And you know, I want to encourage you today that the spirit of wisdom is available to every single one of us.
Right.
James 1:5 says, for those who want, desire, long for wisdom, God will not withhold. Okay? So when we need wisdom in our lives, and I know I need it again and again, we were praying today, weren't we, for someone for wisdom with their parenting. God will give us the wisdom we need to go into the destiny of God. You know, none of us start out with everything we need for life, but God has it ready for us. You know, and in Him, in His hands, in partnership with Him, we can become the person He always saw us to be.
Yeah.
What God calls us to personally or to as a church, He will equip us to. He's made it available. So there you go. There is the entire backstory of Joshua condensed into half an hour or so. And like I said, if you want more, read those books of the Bible. But let me just wrap it up for you and just remind you of what we can be inspired by from Joshua's backstory. Your beginning does not have to dictate your ending. And there's someone who really needs to hear that today, I know. You are not trapped in your circumstances. Nothing is wasted with God. All of our background, our education, what we do at work, nothing is wasted with God. It's preparation for the good works that He has prepared in advance for us to do.
Yeah.
The destiny for your life will be truly fulfilled in partnership with God. Sorry for those people I just spat on. I want to encourage you to seek the presence of God first.
Yeah.
And in there, you are going to find all you need. You know, every battle we fight reminds us that God is with us and He's fighting for us. And He will help us in the battles that we are going to fight. Those victories we've won in the past are a reminder that He's faithful and He is good.
Yeah.
And finally, God is going to equip you for what He's called you for.
Yeah.
So I want you to go for it this year. No excuses. All right?